Okay, so let's talk about the United Nations. You know, the world's most famous peacekeeping organization? Well, what if I told you it was actually built on a foundation of spectacular failure? Let's dive into how that happened.
I mean, just listen to that promise, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. It's powerful stuff, right? This is the core mission of the UN, an organization literally born from the ashes of World War II, to make sure nothing like that could ever happen again. And that goal, well, it still hits home today.
But here's the twist. What if that whole organization, the one designed to achieve this incredible goal, was basically haunted? Haunted by the ghost of a spectacular failure. To really get the UN both its strengths and its, let's be honest, its deep-seated flaws, we have to go back. We've got to look at its predecessor, the one that completely failed to stop the deadliest war in human history. Its failure, ironically, became the blueprint for everything that came next.
All right, let's wind the clock back. We're in the aftermath of World War I, the war to end all wars. The devastation was just unimaginable. And out of that chaos, leaders were desperate for a new way of doing things, a new world order. This dream was really pushed by people like US President Woodrow Wilson, who had this vision for a general association of nations that would guarantee peace for everyone.
And that vision? It became the League of Nations, which got started in 1920. And you have to understand its mission was a total game changer for the time. The goal was to just throw out the old playbook of secret deals and power politics and replace it with open, transparent cooperation and negotiation. I mean, what a revolutionary idea, right?
And they weren't just thinking small either. The League's agenda was massive. This wasn't just about preventing the next big war. No, they were tackling everything you can think of, from helping refugees, to abolishing slavery, to fighting for better working conditions. They were even running global public health campaigns against diseases like malaria. It was like they were creating the world's first international civil service from scratch.
But you knew there was a but coming. This incredible, noble dream was about to smash headfirst into the brutal reality of the 1930s. We're talking about a decade of global economic depression and this super aggressive nationalism that was bubbling up everywhere. It was a perfect storm that would test the League to its absolute breaking point. And yeah, ultimately shatter it completely.
And the crises just started rolling in one after another. And pretty quickly, a really fatal pattern emerged. You see it here. 1931, Japan invades Manchuria. What does the League do? It condemns it, and that's about it. So Japan just quits. Then you've got Hitler pulling Germany out. Then Italy invades Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia. The League tries sanctions, but they're so weak they're basically a joke. The result was always the same. The League would wag its finger, the sanctions would do nothing, and the aggressor would just pack their bags and leave. The League was just totally powerless against its own big, powerful members. Even Mussolini, the guy invading Ethiopia, openly mocked how powerless the League was. And his quote here just nails it. "The League is very well when sparrows shout, but no good at all when eagles fall out." It perfectly sums up the problem, right? The League was fine for sorting out arguments between smaller countries, the sparrows, but the moment the major powers, the eagles, decided to make a move, it was completely and utterly helpless.
So here's the key takeaway. The League's failure wasn't just bad luck. No, it was baked into its very design. It was a structural failure. Think about it. It had no army. Its biggest champion, the United States, never even joined. And maybe worst of all, any big decision required a unanimous vote, which basically gave every country a veto. It was a toothless tiger in a jungle full of predators. And that right there, became the perfect negative blueprint for what not to do the next time around. So, as World War II is raging, the Allies are already thinking ahead. They're planning for the world that comes after, and you can bet they were laser-focused on one thing: not repeating the same mistakes. They basically put the League's collapse under a microscope, studying every single flaw with this incredible detail.
And you can see the results right here. The UN Charter is almost like a point-by-point takedown of the League's weaknesses. The US isn't just a member, it's a founding member and host. That whole unanimous voting thing, gone, replaced with a majority system. And the biggest one, enforcement. The new organization could actually authorize military force. It was a much more pragmatic, hard-nosed design. The single biggest evolution, the thing that was supposed to give this new body its bite, was the creation of the Security Council. This was designed, very deliberately, to be the teeth that the old League of Nations never ever had. All the real power, the ability to make things happen, was supposed to be concentrated right here. And this whole idea was built on President Roosevelt's pretty realist vision of what he called the Four Policemen.
The idea was that the major allied powers, the US, the UK, the Soviet Union, and China, would act as the world's enforcers. They had the muscle, so they would have the responsibility to enforce the Council's decisions and keep the peace, using force if they had to.
Okay, but here's where it gets complicated. Giving those great powers that kind of enforcement role, well, it came with a really steep price tag. It was a massive compromise, one that was probably necessary to even get the UN off the ground. But it's a compromise that continues to define, and let's be real, often completely paralyze the organization to this very day.
And that price was the veto. The deal was this: to make sure the great powers would join and, just as importantly, stay, they were given permanent seats on the Security Council and the power of the veto. It was a simple guarantee. The Council could never take action against the core interest of one of its 5 permanent members. That's the US, Russia, China, the UK, and France. It was a deal breaker. Without the veto, they just wouldn't have signed on. Period.
So what's the consequence of that deal? Well, look at this number, 89. Since 1945, just the United States alone has used its veto 89 times. It's such a stark illustration of how just one single nation can completely block the will of the rest of the world.
And if you break it down, you see that over half of those US vetoes were used to block resolutions that were critical of Israel. But look, this isn't just about the US. Russia has repeatedly used its veto to block any action related to its invasion of Ukraine. China frequently uses its veto to protect its allies. It just perfectly showcases the veto's ultimate power, to create absolute gridlock the second a permanent member's own interests are on the line.
And this creates a massive, fundamental contradiction right at the very heart of the UN. It's almost two-faced. On one hand, the UN Charter talks a big game about the sovereign equality of all its members. But then you look at the reality of the Security Council, and what do you see? A clear hierarchy, where 5 countries are explicitly, undeniably more equal than all the others.
So, where does all this leave us? Well, it leaves us with an organization that is just full of contradictions. It has this deeply conflicted legacy, an institution that was literally born from failure and is still defined by that constant tug of war between high-minded idealism and the harsh reality of raw power. Because while the Security Council gets all the headlines for being deadlocked and paralyzed, it is so important to remember there's a whole other side to the UN. It's this huge network of agencies, many of them direct descendants of the League's best ideas, by the way. You're talking about the World Health Organization, UNESCO, the International Labor Organization. These are the parts of the UN that are out there every single day providing food aid, healthcare, and relief to millions of people. This part of the UN, it really, really works. And that's really the paradox of the UN, its dual identity. On one side, you have a security body that is so often hamstrung by the exact same great powers that created it. But on the other, you have this incredible humanitarian superpower that's actually fulfilling the best parts of the League of Nations' original vision. It is somehow both a frustrating failure and a remarkable success, all at the same time.
So in the end, the UN was built on some really hard-earned lessons from a massive failure. It was designed with a very pragmatic, if definitely flawed, understanding of how power really works in the world. But now, as our world keeps changing, as global power continues to shift, you have to ask the question, can an institution that was designed by our grandparents really solve the crises of our grandchildren? Is this 80-year-old solution, with all its built-in contradictions, still the right tool for the job?